Okay, let's see if I can get this review of Supergirl out in one take. That's how enthusiastic I am about making this video. I'd probably give the film a 4 out of 10. 4 out of 10. It's in and around the Marvels territory. That's in fact it might be in some regards ever so slightly better than the Marvels. The Marvels was a particularly low, but that is pretty much the worst superhero film I've ever seen. So the fact that Supergirl might be half a notch above that film is not saying very much. I'll give you an example of just how bad the writing is in this film. So we have this character. Her name is Ruth or Ruthie or something. She's the young girl who comes to Kara asking for her help to track down the bad guy who killed her family. And the bad guy is extremely poorly written. I mean, lots of people have talked about how paper thin he is in terms of motivation. There's no backstory. There's nothing. He doesn't even have a personality. He's just a generic, off the shelf bad guy doing bad guy things. And how they establish he's the bad guy is because he traffics children, right? So he's a human trafficker. That's it. That's enough. That's all. That's as far as that's as far as he goes. Krem is his name. And so he's killed this girl's family, and this girl comes to Kara, and Kara is just hopping from one red sun planet to the next. So she she's going to these red sun planets because she doesn't have superpowers there. Even though she's a very, very competent fighter, still beating up guys way bigger than her, which is like, okay, sure. And she does that so she can get drunk, basically. She doesn't want to have her power so she can get drunk. Um, so she's still sort of nursing her grief for the loss of her world. But of course, as you know, and as we've discussed before, she's playing the character like, you know, she's Clint Eastwood, Unforgiven type, 50, 60-year-old man, Logan in, Wolverine Logan, that sort of thing. And it's just not believable that a 23-year-old girl is this broken and jaded for life. It's just, you just can't buy it. Anyway, there's a scene in the film where Ruth asks Kara if she'll help track down Krem, and they're in a field, and Kara has landed her spaceship there, and she's walking around with Crypto, and she's refusing to help. It's like, sorry for your loss, but I can't help you. And she's like, I want to try and find him and track him down. And then conveniently, it's like, I can't believe this is in the film. It's like, I can't believe the writing is this bad. Conveniently, Krem is just there. He's just there over, they don't realize it, but he's over at Kara's spaceship. And he goes inside. And when they realize this, the dog, Crypto, runs at him. And he shoots the dog with a poison dart. He didn't shoot it dead. He shoots it with a poison dart. Why? To give Kara a reason, right, to go after him. And so he got a poison dart, so now she has to get the antidote because he's sick. And then Krem flies off in the spaceship. So this guy that they were talking about trying to track down was just there. He showed up and then he left. So now Kara has a reason to go after him, and the rest of the film, so you've got the start and you've got this big chunk of the film in the middle where it's just a run out the clock type situation with a series of action set pieces, like they're on this space bus and these tech raiders with using holograms come in and try and steal everybody's stuff on the bus. And Kara ends up, she tries to fight them, and then she ends up being sucked out the airlock, and then she gets exposed to the sun, and that's when she gets her superpowers back, and then she fights them and gets information. So just sort of planet hopping, get a bit of information about Krem here, and then a little bit more here. They go from one planet to the next, basically, and then they meet Lobo along the way, played by Jason Momoa, who is playing the kind of character that he's really good at playing, but he plays often. So he's kind of a mixture, a little bit of Arthur Curry, Aquaman, but he's he's more chaotic, he's more crazy, and he's a little bit the character he played in the Fast and Furious film. I think it's Fast and Furious 10 or whatever. So it's that kind of character he typically kind of plays. And he's not in that much of the film, but he shows up at the end. So that given the amount of power that this character has, Supergirl, she is much like Superman, an overpowered superhero. And so they obviously have to try to slow her down a little bit, because you know that the confrontation at the end with Krem is going to be pretty short. It's going to be over pretty quickly. So there's this one bit in the film where they encounter a green sun, which makes her really sick, and that just slows the film down a bit. And the thing is that it, this is a film that's actually under 2 hours. It's only a little over 100 minutes or so, but it feels like a 2.5 hour film. So in the end, then they're on a planet, they're fighting Krem, and for some reason, Kara just decides to put on the Supergirl outfit, and that's the one you've seen in the trailers. And Krem does shoot her with a dart, a kryptonite dart, and that briefly incapacitates her, weakens her, and then Lobo shows up and helps out a bit, and then she, eventually overcomes the bad guy, and then the other girl, I'll call her Ruth or Ruthie, she wants to kill Krem, and then Kara convinces her not to, because you still have an open heart. She doesn't want her to, I guess, lose her innocence at this stage. So she doesn't, and then Kara just kills him anyway. And then Kara goes back to Earth, meets with Superman. David Cornsweet is in a little bit of the film, not much, and it's really just a cameo role. And then he's in the end. She shows up at his apartment and she says that she's coming home, and that's it. She doesn't learn anything. There's nothing that happens in the story that changes her, that helps her grow at all. There's nothing, and it's not an overt feminist movie or anything, but it's not telling the kind of hero story that is compelling, and that's very common in a lot of modern feminist movies out of Hollywood, because the female character is always perfect. She's always a bit of a Mary Sue, like Rey in Star Wars, or like Carol Danvers in the Marvels, or Captain Marvel. And Captain Marvel is a classic example of that, because we're told that she was already perfect. She was already this great surrogate aunt, friend. She was already a great fighter pilot. She was held back by this thing on her neck, and she was deceived, and the super intelligence thing was holding her back, and Jude Law's character's holding her back. And once those things go away, she's allowed to fully demonstrate how amazing she is and realize her true potential. And that's basically the situation here as well. Kara doesn't show any real weakness. She doesn't show any vulnerability. She doesn't show any flaws. She doesn't need to improve as a person. She doesn't learn how to be a hero, right? She doesn't learn to overcome, ego or to learn personal responsibility or whatever it might be. In the same way as I talked about before when I talked about Captain Marvel, here's this girl who gets these superpowers, becomes unbelievably strong. She can do basically anything, and she never has to learn how to wield them. She doesn't learn that with great power comes great responsibility, the Spider-Man thing. And it's much the same with Kara. Whereas the story with Superman, a common theme was, he could do anything. He could rule the entire world. But he can't save everyone. He sometimes has to make extremely difficult decisions. And Kara doesn't have to make any difficult decisions. And certainly not any that give her a greater sense of understanding of her place in the world and her powers and her relationality to human beings. So she doesn't go on any kind of a human journey, and we need characters to be flawed. We need them to make mistakes, and she never makes any mistakes. We need them to make mistakes, to fail, and then to pick themselves up, dust themselves off, get back on the horse again. And that's part of the hero's journey. You saw that with Tony Stark and Iron Man. Here was a guy who was immensely arrogant and didn't take into account what his weapons from Stark Industries were doing.
to the world and the harm that he was causing. And he is this billionaire playboy philanthropist, right? And he gets humbled and he ends up nearly dying, and he's stuck in a cave, and he has to, with spare parts, has to build an Iron Man suit. And that experience changed him. And it was the same with Thor, right? The first Thor film is such a great story it's a classic superhero story. Here's this extremely arrogant young man from Asgard who thought that it was a mere formality that he would become king, but his ego got the better of him. He got banished to Earth. He didn't have his powers, and he couldn't even lift his own hammer. And so he had to become worthy again. He had to build himself back up. And there's no such story with Captain Marvel, and there's no such story here with Supergirl. And that's the comparison. With this story, all she has to do to become her true self, to realize her true power, her true potential, is to get exposed to a yellow sun. If she just stays off the booze for a few minutes and goes on a spaceship and gets exposed to a yellow sun, she has her superpowers, and then that's it, and nothing can stop her. If you've ever seen that lecture by Trey Parker and Matt Stone, the creators of South Park, where they're talking about how your story should be structured, how the plot beats in your story should progress. It should never be, this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this. It should never go like that, right? Because that's just a series of random things that are happening, and they're not connected, and they don't seem logical, right? What they said in that lecture was, it should be, this happened, therefore this happened, but this happened, therefore this happened. But that's the way it should be. That's the way it should progress. So this happened, and then as a result, logically, what flows from that is that this character made this choice. That event had a consequence, and that's what should motivate the actions of your characters and the decisions they make. And then they make that decision, and then you can have all these sort of branch points that come out of that, which is that the consequences of their actions from there, and they should flow in a logical manner from one to the next. And when I talked about that example with Krem just showing up, they're talking about him in this field, and she's like, I want to find him, and I want to get revenge, and he's just there. That is an example of, this happened, and then this happened, and then he just happened to be there, and he shoots Crypto. Well, we can't kill Crypto, so what does he do? Well, it's a poison dart. Oh, okay. Oh, great. So now Kara has a reason to get up off her drunk ass and go and fight him. I mean, it's just appalling writing. Really, really bad. 4 out of 10 is generous, I think. This film just, it has no, look, they're all commercial products, these movies, obviously, for studios. But you want to believe that as part of the world building of a new franchise, not that I think the DCU should have even been started at this point. I think it was a mistake, even though David Corn Sweat is very good in the role of Clark Kent and Superman. However, this film has just no reason for being, there's no story that's worth telling. Really poor movie. I suppose the only thing that's left to discuss now is what will no doubt be the absolute carnage at the box office. You're missing nothing. I've no doubt many of you will just watch it when it comes out on television or something, or you might catch a few minutes of it. You'll watch, at best, you'll get through the first 15-20 minutes, then you'll turn it off. That's the kind of movie it is, and maybe you'll just fast forward to the end or something and just see, oh, okay, right. It's one of those films that if you watched it with the sound off at 2x speed, you'd have a fair idea what's happening. you wouldn't need to hear any of the dialogue. I can, if someone asked you then what happened in the movie, you'd have a fair idea, even though you had no sound and you were watching at 2x speed, maybe even 3x speed. You'd be able to just watch it on a fast forward. That's going to do it. That's my review of Supergirl. So there you go. It doesn't bode well. It doesn't bode well for the next film in the DCU, which is Man of Tomorrow, another Superman film. And the first one divided audiences. And this one is just outright awful. This is just the second film, and it's outright awful. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Take care, guys. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.